Station wagons. That's what we call them here in the U.S. And for some reason, they're just not popular. They've never really caught on. I suppose if you go way back, they were a thing. Maybe 50s, 60s, even part of the 70s. But past the 80s, it's all minivans or big trucks. I'm not even kidding. That's what families use. Some people literally buy, a Ram 1500, a Chevy, Silverado, Ford F-150, things like that, for a family vehicle. It's not too uncommon here. I, as an automotive enthusiast of all sorts, have always been drawn to wagons. I think I have two of them, although they're kind of on the cusp of, is it an SUV or is it a station wagon? I have a Subaru Ascent, which is built on a car platform, and I have a Saturn Vue, which is also built on a car platform. So you could argue they're wagons, or they could be small SUVs. Not really sure which they are. Regardless, we're going to look at why station wagons are more popular throughout Europe than they are in America. I've seen that in videos, many wagons, many hatchbacks, and the automotive landscape there in traffic looks a lot different than it does here in the U.S. Let's find out why. This is from
Wagons
CNBC.
away.
Be linked down below. Check them out.
Hi, I'm Jack Smith, and right now it's station wagon savings time in the West. Time to hit the trail in high style with all the room and comfort that only a Rambler station wagon can give you.
A Rambler.
The station wagon
Nice.
was once a fixture of American family life.
Right.
It was a common sight in American garages and frequently featured in popular culture. These days,
Ghostbusters.
however, it has nearly vanished from U.S. roads. Americans, at least most of them, just don't like the segment, and it shows in the tiny number of wagons sold every year.
I forgot to mention we also love huge SUVs. Chevy Tahoes, Chevy Suburbans, Ford Expeditions, things like that.
Americans just don't like wagons.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. We have rejected the body style for many years. It's been declining. We think back to perhaps some of those movies like National Lampoon's Vacation, where a family travels across the country in a wagon. Those days are long behind us.
Yeah.
And these days, wagon sales are less than 2% of all industry sales.
To be fair, they're showing a Cadillac. This Cadillac CTS you could get in a wagon, and a Cadillac CTS V, which is the supercharged manual transmission, basically Corvette wagon. You could get in a wagon with the 6-speed manual and a supercharged LS motor. Thing was awesome. They're really expensive, even used. But you got to give America credit for that one. That's a cool wagon that a lot of car guys would want.
Meanwhile, crossovers and sport utility vehicles continue to swallow market share.
Yeah, they dominate.
Leading many manufacturers to believe that if they want to sell a wagon, they need to lift it a bit, maybe cover it with some cladding, and call it a crossover.
I don't know if Subaru markets their Outback and Ascent as wagons. I'm not sure, or if they call them crossovers. That's a good question. But I will say they are the only brand I could think of that you could argue is very popular still to this day with wagons or wagon-like vehicles.
Well, you want the
Kinda
crossover
interesting.
tag associated with it because that's what people are buying. And that's what they want to buy. At some point, they may want another tag because it's no longer cool to own a crossover or an SUV, but right now that's not the case yet.
In 2018, consumers around the world bought just under 2.5 million wagons.
Wow.
Roughly a mere 3% of all new cars sold. In the United States,
Look at how low
the
it is
segment
here.
represents only about 1 to 2% of all sales. But in some
Wow.
European countries, sales are several times that.
Oh,
Wagons
yeah.
represented nearly 20% of all sales in Germany and at least a quarter of sales in some Scandinavian countries, such as Finland and Sweden.
Wow.
Wagons also comprised 23% of all sales in Czech Republic, 16% in Slovakia, and 15% in Poland.
Hey, Czech Republic, Skoda Superb wagon, right? They make those, right? Skoda Octavia wagon. Hey, I'd take one of those. Those are hella cool. I have a video on that.
It's our home country. Close to 50% of our volume is related to wagons.
Jeez.
You have the best residual values, you have the most loyal consumers, and also that is how we live in Sweden. Nature is very important. We do exactly in line with Americans. It's a lot of football and a lot of sports associated with our kids. So we need a space.
Yeah.
And so the legacy of wagons is really in our DNA. Also, you see them all over the place in the roads in Sweden and in Europe.
More than 70% of all wagons sold in the world are sold in Europe.
No way.
There,
wow.
the wagon is still seen as an efficient blend of function and performance.
Right.
Especially when fuel prices can be quite high.
I will say, real quick, let's break this down easily. You can have a wagon that's sporty. You can have it have a lot of power and like a tightened suspension, so it could be basically a sports car with some cargo room. You can have a wagon that's really durable, simple, like diesel drivetrain, manual transmission. The thing is straightforward, durable, and probably gets amazing fuel mileage as well. Again, with cargo room, practicality, right? It's kind of, if you kind of argue what's a perfect vehicle, or at least a vehicle that delivers so many, ticks off the box, right? Like it fills in so many gaps. That could be a station wagon, right? A car won't have as much room, a typical sedan or a coupe, of course. A minivan or a van might be bigger, but then again, it doesn't handle as good. It might not look as good. A truck, again, could haul more, tow more. You could beat up maybe a little more, but again, it's not going to be as fast, not going to be as nimble, and of course, not going to get as good a fuel mileage. The station wagon is an interesting vehicle. It's hard to argue against it, but for some reason, we just love big gas guzzling vehicles in the U.S. as of late.
In Europe, the station wagon continues to be the body type for many families, even though they have lost traction as well in Europe.
Despite the fact that Europe is the world's wagon stronghold, data do suggest that sport utilities are eating into its share on that continent as well.
Even in Europe.
Of course, on the other end of the spectrum, U.S. data show that sport utility vehicles have completely eclipsed the wagon as the family hauler of choice.
Right.
Wagons have steadily lost share in the U.S. new car market, from 3.69% of new car sales in 2008 to 1.4% in 2018.
I'm surprised it was that high in
SUVs
08.
grew their share of the new car market in the U.S. by 20% from 2008 to 2018. They now make up...
Look at that rise. Holy crap, SUVs are unbelievably popular.
Nearly half of all new car sales.
SUVs and trucks
For
just
now,
dominate.
Wagons have managed to find a way to keep a foothold, albeit a small one,
especially with
in
Subaru.
America.
Subaru.
For example, the segment-straddling Subaru Outback has been a tremendously successful product for that company.
You see them everywhere, brand
part
new
wagon,
still.
Part crossover, the Outback was introduced in the 1995 model year as a variant of the Subaru Legacy, but was soon spun out into its own distinct brand and has become something of a phenomenon.
And to be fair, as I mentioned, our family car, we have a Subaru Ascent. It's only a couple years old. And that is a sister car, same platform as the Outback. It's just a little bit bigger, right? So, I don't know if you want to call that. They probably call that a crossover. But it feels like a car. It drives like a car, right? I've had actual SUVs before. We have an SUV, a Suburban. The Subaru Ascent feels like a sports car, of course, compared to the Suburban. It's not an SUV or a truck. It definitely feels car-like.
The Outback alone accounted for the vast majority of wagon sales in the U.S. Of that 1.4% of the U.S. market wagons have, the Outback alone makes up 1.2%.
Wow.
In other words, almost all of it.
They dominate.
That means all wagons sold by all other brands combined would account for just 0.2% of the total U.S.
How did Subaru do that in the U.S.?
So when we talk about wagons, we're essentially talking
really
about one model with a very decent industry share.
Outback is an example of how wagon-like vehicles can be successfully marketed in the United States, and perhaps gives an idea of how they are likely to look in the future if they stick around. Though it retains many of the basic features of a wagon, the car is lifted a bit and covered in plastic cladding to give it more of a rugged outdoor appearance.
Yeah.
It retains the basic silhouette of the wagon, but the Outback has evolved over time to incorporate more attributes of SUVs and crossovers, Subaru told CNBC. This includes standard all-wheel drive, the ability to tow up to 3,500 pounds, and a full 8.7 inches of ground clearance.
See, I'm glad they alluded to this. There has been a unbelievable rise in the last about 10 years of this obsession with off-road vehicles from the factory in the U.S. So every truck went from just having different basic trim levels, mostly work trucks and maybe a mid-level truck and like a luxury truck, right? For example, same with SUVs. And then now there's been this obsession with having like 2 or 3 different hardcore off-road type trucks and SUVs. They come with all-terrain tires from the factory and have all this, hard-looking, dark-colored cladding everywhere and armor and, a bull bar and skid plates and all these things, right? It's like a new thing to have all these crazy off-road models. And Subaru must know what they're doing, at least here in the U.S., because they never had like an off-road Subaru Outback before until the last few years only, like maybe 3 or 4 years, they've had the Subaru Outback Wilderness, which I'll show a picture of here. And you can see, again, what they're playing to, the off-road market. It has all-terrain tires. It's all kind of contrast looking, with the different logo and the mountains and, of course, like the off-road armor and cladding and just kind of the more rugged appearance, right? So it is kind of interesting to see them play to that, and it's worked because I could tell you I have seen so many brand new Subaru Outbacks and Foresters and Ascents on the road. They're clearly doing well with wagons, even in a country like the U.S. that has shown over time they're not a fan of wagons. Somehow, Subaru is selling a lot of them. It's pretty interesting. I imagine the wagon distribution throughout different countries in Europe is more spread out. I don't think Subaru is probably dominating there like they are here. I think you might see a mix of wagons, BMWs, Mercedes, Skoda, different brands like this. I'm sure it's more evenly distributed, I would guess.
Higher than what is found on many SUVs, the company said. General
Buick
Motors sells the Buick Regal Tour X,
which, to be fair, I think is kind of neat just because it's different. I've seen these at a dealership for sale. I have never, literally in my life, never seen this in traffic on the road. Just, they must not sell well.
U.S. version of the Opel Insignia wagon GM used to sell in Europe when it owned the Opel brand.
See, Buick has like so many rebadged Opel models. I still have to learn about Opel. But, man, Buick like rebadges those all the time.
Notably, the U.S. version has the same plastic cladding and slight lift, which is not seen on the European version.
Wow.
But with a lower center of gravity, it gives more sedan-like driving dynamics and a lower roof for easy rooftop access. Key
the Opel,
features
right.
wagon buyers want in a car. There are several positive signs for wagon fans elsewhere in the U.S. if they have the cash. Much of the variety in the U.S. wagon market is found at the higher end, where luxury and high performance can gloss over the otherwise dowdy and domestic image the wagon has. Given the fact that the countries with some of the highest wagon sales are Germany and the Scandinavian nations, it makes sense that most of these premium wagons are from German and Scandinavian automakers.
Yes.
The Swedish brand Volvo is perhaps the brand best known for wagons, and it's among the brands most committed to the segment in the United States.
Gotta admit, that's pretty cool looking.
Volvo has lately focused intensely on building out its
sharp
lineup of sport utility vehicles. A substantial portion of its portfolio is still in wagons.
We have the same, I see the same opportunities in US. So one part of me is a little bit confused that this should be much bigger. The volume should be much bigger.
You would think.
But then we have the SUV trend in US that probably overlaps that kind of, because you get the space too, an SUV. But I would say the wagons are, for me, they're beautiful. And I think...
I agree. I have no doubt in my mind that most people... at least, I can't guarantee it, I guess. But I feel like a lot of people would think, for example, these different Volvo wagons are very attractive. They are. They look premium. They look sleek. They look classy, right? And I imagine the price isn't terrible on these. I'm sure they're not like super cheap, but I don't think they're unattainable either, right? I'm sure they're a moderate price, a fair price, and comparable, or probably much less actually, than like a fully loaded Chevy Suburban, Cadillac Escalade, Lincoln Navigator. These are big SUVs that are loaded with options, but they're terribly expensive. We're talking $80,000 to $100,000 US, which to most people is not affordable. That's not a good price. But for some reason, it's what people go to, right? It's weird. I think it might come down to maybe marketing. And also, I think Americans, it comes down to that bubble effect. I think a lot of people are aware that we have Volvo and Audi and BMW here. But most people, for some reason, just go to what they know. And they end up buying these Chevy Suburbans and other things brand new over and over again. And they don't consider this Volvo that is really cool, has a lot of tech, and a sleek drivetrain, really, nimble for probably less money than the fully loaded SUV. They probably just don't think of it and don't know enough about it. That's my guess, and I'm talking about the average buyer. I know there's people that love Volvo and love BMW and whatever here, but that's the minority, right? That's not a lot of people, my guess, right? And this is just me throwing my guesses out there, my opinions. I'm just speculating, but I feel like that's in the ballpark. Because if I could go back 1.5 years, 2 years ago when we bought our Subaru, don't get me wrong, I'm very happy with it. It has a lot of good tech in it, a lot of safety features. I really like it. But it would have been cool to consider like a Volvo or a Mercedes-Benz wagon or something, right? To be different. But I'll be honest, I didn't, even me as a car enthusiast that knows more about, different cars than the average person does over here, I just didn't think of it. I went to Subaru because they're so popular here. Or, of course, I looked at domestic brands, like always. I guess it's all about presence, right? We're a weird
see
market.
The cars here. Design-wise, they are not boxy anymore, and they are not boring.
No.
You get both.
They're beautiful.
You get the driving capabilities as a sedan, and you get more space, and also it looks sporty.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
That's what we aim for.
I agree.
Volvo sells the mid-sized V60 wagon and the larger V90. Both can be bought in the cross-country trim, which
Nice.
means the car is lifted and comes with the familiar dark cladding
Yeah.
on the sides of the car. And Volvo also has a 415 horsepower performance hybrid version of its
Ooh.
V60,
Ooh.
bearing Volvo's Polestar brand, which
Oh.
was once its in-house performance shop
That
and
looks
now specializes
freaking awesome.
in making high-performance electric vehicles.
Wow. I didn't even know about that.
Mercedes-Benz sells its E-Class wagons in the U.S., mostly to well-heeled buyers with families.
Yeah.
The car sells especially well in the Northeast.
Hmm.
Wagon
So
sales
see, regions. I don't live in the Northeast, so you might see them more up there. But here, unless you're like downtown Chicago, you might see some international brands like this more often. But, out in, outside of the city, way out in the suburbs and northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin area where I'm usually at, it's, no, you just don't see these as much.
make up a tiny portion of Mercedes' U.S. total, 0.7% to be exact.
That's
But
crazy.
buyers
Wow.
are loyal, and they pay. An E450 4MATIC wagon starts at about $66,000, and the higher performance AMG E63S starts above $108,000.
Okay, so for the regular car, 66 grand, not gonna lie, that's pretty steep. But it's not, this is a crazy time where things are so expensive. Any truck worth a damn is gonna be around that price or more. A nicely equipped Chevy Suburban is going to be around that or more. A Cadillac Escalade is going to be way more than that, right? So it's not like it's any more steep than other things out there. Now, the AMG, of course, is very expensive, but, there's a whole laundry list of cars that is around 108 grand as well. It's not like it's the outlier, so I don't know.
Fellow German automaker Audi said in August of 2019 it plans to bring the RS6 Avant wagon to the US. The
That is a freaking sick car, dude.
RS6 Avant is a performance wagon Audi will sell
Damn.
alongside the A4 all-road wagon it currently offers and the A6 all-road, which Audi said in October it will also be bringing back to the US.
That's freaking awesome.
In recent years
Damn,
in the United
I should've
States,
considered
Audi
one of
has
those.
only sold its A4 all-road wagon, which is also a popular choice among premium wagon buyers. Even Porsche has a wagon-like vehicle.
Yeah.
However, the number of wagon-loving diehards seems to be shrinking, and many in the industry are not optimistic that the wagon will make a comeback anytime soon.
Well, I think the automotive landscape is always very educational and fascinating to learn about in different regions. I'm still always ever learning about it in the U.S. because I think our market is so bizarre, right? We're a big country with so many people, and there's so many different regions that are into kind of different cars, even just within the U.S. Not to mention, our market seems to be quite bizarre compared to so many different countries. So I think it's always fun learning about it. It's also fun for me, of course, learning about different markets, like learning about the car market in Australia and New Zealand, learning about the car market in any country throughout Europe, I think is beyond fascinating because most of the time it's a lot different, and it's usually educational, thinking why are they into this different type of vehicle, and then you learn some of the reasons why and how it makes sense. I think at the end of the day, what we can take from this is, of course, markets are all going to be different. I think the US market is in a weird spot because cars have gotten so expensive in the last few years compared to even 10 years ago and beyond, and you see shifts, right? I think big SUVs and trucks dominated for a long time. I think they're finally losing a little bit of market share because they are so bad on gas and because they're getting so expensive. So we might see more popular, entrants in the wagon space. Maybe people will go back to sedans. I'm not really sure. I think the U.S. market might be up for grabs. And I think it's always changing year to year. It's really kind of hard to follow. But I think it comes down to certain factors. I think gas, fuel is really cheap in the U.S. usually compared to most places throughout Europe. I think that plays a part. I think that helps identify why Europeans mostly would be into hatchbacks and wagons for the most part because of fuel prices and maybe infrastructure, the way streets are, the way cities are built. I think that all plays a part as well. But there's no denying that a lot of the European station wagons are really freaking cool. They're classy, they're sporty, they look so luxurious. I love them. But unfortunately, a lot of Americans just don't pay attention to them. Let me know your thoughts and theories down below. I would love to hear them. Please throw a like on there if you enjoyed this. Subscribe to be part of this amazing community we do have here. Check that link down there to watch that whole video as we did skip around, and of course browse our channel. Click that join button to become a member for super cheap. My name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker, and until next time, y'all, catch you later.